This is part 17 of creepiest things that have happened to me as a nurse. All right, I debated for a long time whether to tell this one, but I think enough years have passed and I have changed jobs so many times, no one's gonna know who I'm talking about. This one time, this one job, they hired a new male nurse for night shift, and he was just a little off. Like, he looked normal, but the way he interacted with people was like really off. And he like asked my friend out, and my friend was single, and she's like, I don't know, I get a creepy vibe from him. And I was like, yeah, follow your gut, follow your intuition. Everything seems fine. And then we found out he was married. And then we found out later, before he got fired, that he murdered his wife on shift. Like, he left and was like, oh, I'm going on break, watch my patients. Murdered his wife and then came back and worked the rest of his shift. What? Ladies, follow your intuition. It still creeps me out that I worked with like a murderer, like alongside a murderer.
This is a ghost story for the nurses. One of my patients was dying and his family didn't want to be contacted overnight if he passed, as they lived too far away to make it. I sat with my patient so he wasn't alone, and he passed away at 5:10 in the morning. I called his sister at 7 a.m. to inform her that he passed away. She asked what time had he passed, and I said 5:10 in the morning. She told me that she fell asleep on the couch the night before, which she never does. She was woken up at 5:10 in the morning by someone knocking at her front door. She got up to answer the door and no one was there.
I used to laugh at mother's intuition until this happened. I was studying abroad in France for the summer over a decade ago. Well, I took an extended weekend to go and check out London for 5 days or so. Well, while I was there, my mom calls me up and says she has a bad feeling and she changed my train ticket so that I leave a day earlier. I am very confused, but at the point the ticket had already been changed, so I just go with it. So I left London on the morning of July 6 instead of, as originally planned, leaving the following morning. The next day, on July 7, 2005, there was a terrorist attack on the London Metro that ended up killing 56 people and injuring hundreds. I would most likely have been on the tube at the time had my ticket back not been switched. Yeah. Now if my mother wants to change my tickets for any reason, I don't say a thing other than, thank you, Mom.
Have you ever had a bad gut feeling about someone and it was right? Yes. My dad's best friend growing up has a son my age. We were really close as kids, but they moved away and I didn't talk to him for years. When we were teens, my dad's friend came to visit. Something about his son literally made my skin crawl. I was left alone at home with him and my 3 young siblings while the parents went out for the night, and I was nearly frantic trying to ensure he did not have a moment alone with my siblings. When our parents returned, I told them something was wrong with the son, and to please not leave me alone with him again. My dad was upset and demanded to know why I would say that. Did the son do something? He honestly hadn't actually done or said anything that I could pin this feeling on. So I told them, I think my animal brain just knows a predator when I see one. My dad thought I was being dramatic, but my mom believed me and made sure we weren't alone with the son for the rest of their visit. About a year later, it turned out the son got caught in the act of R-wording his niece. He told the police he was glad he was caught because he couldn't stop himself. My dad has never doubted my intuition since. What is your story about having a horrible gut feeling about a person or situation that turned out to be dead on? My mother, around 9 to 10-year-old at the time, was eating dinner with her family and someone knocked at the front door. Her dad, my grandfather, got up to answer and it was a salesman. My grandfather politely declined whatever product he was selling and whatever spiel he was going to go on. As they were having family dinner, the salesman was very aggressive in trying to continue speaking and even tried to invite himself inside their home. At that point, my usually level-headed grandfather gets upset and says something along the lines of, "You need to leave now." Finally, the salesman gives up and proceeds to the next house. But not before my grandfather called the neighbors to warn them. The young female neighbor answered the phone and said she was home alone, so my grandfather told her to not answer the door whatsoever. Fast forward a few months and the salesman turns out to be a serial killer, targeting young women home by themselves and posing as a salesman. To sum it all up, my grandfather may have very well saved his neighbor's life. Always reminds me to trust my gut when I get a bad feeling.
Have you ever had a bad gut feeling about someone and it was right? Yes. When I voiced it, I was told I was worrying too much. I worked for a private company when I was 16. We dealt with solar panels. I took care of the paperwork. I had used a computer my whole life, so I was teaching them sometimes. Anyway, one day we get a new salesman. He immediately sent a chill down my spine. There was just something about him I didn't like. He really creeped me out. He didn't even say anything to me the first day and already I had the morbid opinion of him. I thought maybe I was just be paranoid and try to get over it. I got to know him better and that didn't calm me. I couldn't tell if I was being overly cautious, but he still sent a chill down my spine every time I talked to him. It was almost like you could feel he had bad thoughts going through his mind. Fast forward maybe 2 weeks and I'm called into the office with the 2 other women there and my boss explained he just let the creepy guy go. Apparently he had taken someone, who was given a week off with pay, and pinned her against a wall. He kept telling her how he knew she wanted him and that she didn't have to say anything. He could just start, and he proceeded to grope her and continue to keep her pressed against the wall. She called the cops. This was all at work BTW. Since then, I've never doubted my gut.
I was like 8 or 9 when my parents took me and my younger brother to stay the night at my paternal grandparents' house because they were in the middle of divorcing. They lived in a farmhouse that was connected to a barn, with machinery, gasoline tanks, and hay on the ground floor and furnished rooms on the floor above that, and the room we were supposed to stay in was in that barn. As soon as we went into the guest room, I was overwhelmed by panic and felt really dizzy. I turned around and just said that we will not sleep in that room and we spent the night on the couch in the living room instead. Later that night, a gas leak in the barn ignited and almost the entire barn including the guest rooms on its top floor exploded. Maybe I had that weird feeling because the gas had leaked into the room already but no one else felt anything and I'm sure I would be dead if I hadn't noticed it. A few years ago I was at a bar with a couple of friends. All was good, we were drinking and having fun. All of the sudden, we heard this discussion taking place just a couple of tables from us. 2 guys decided to have a shouting/threat match. I stopped everything to pay attention to them. My friends were making fun of me, saying I was gossipy. One of the guys in the discussion got up and left. Immediately after he left I told my friends we had to go. Now. Let's get the hell out now. They didn't get why I was like that, but I'm their friends since forever. They reluctantly agreed. We went to a different bar in a different neighborhood but I couldn't take my mind off of those 2 guys. The next day, the news were talking about a bar fight. Apparently the guy who got up went home, grabbed a gun and came back for a drive-by. Killed 4 people in the process. My grandpa taught me to never ignore my gut and I couldn't be happier to have listened.